We're going to get started, and folks will join as they come. My name is Barry Spielman. I'm Product Marketing Director for Cybersecurity at Allot, and I'm very excited to be hosting this webinar today. Now, today we're going to be sharing with you a recent survey that was conducted with Chief Marketing Officers and Marketing Vice Presidents from service providers around the world. We were interested in gauging their views on offering cybersecurity services to their customers. And we believe the results of the survey are going to be quite interesting for you to see. So we turned to Coleman Parkes Research in London to conduct the survey on our behalf. And we'll be presenting the results of the survey in this webinar together with Ian Parkes, Director at Coleman Parkes Research, and with Murali Prasad, Allot's Regional Vice President, Service Providers in North America, and Sean O'Bray, the Sales Director for Security at Allot. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Good morning.
Great. So following the survey, we'll be looking at an example of a service provider, in this case AT&T, which is actively promoting cyber services to its customers. And here, part of a recent interview that was conducted between a former CEO and former CISO of AT&T. We'll also have a good discussion around all of this stuff with our distinguished panel, and I think that you will find it interesting. So in a minute, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ian, who'll get us started by presenting the findings of the survey, but quickly, a couple of quick housekeeping items. So the first thing is that the webinar is going to be recorded and it will be available on demand on our resources section of the website. And the second thing is that we invite you to ask questions. Use the Q&A tab here at the bottom, not the chat, the Q&A tab, and we will answer as many questions as we have time for. And if we find ourselves in a situation where we don't have enough time to answer all the questions, then we will get back to you offline. So again, go ahead and ask those questions. And for now, I think we're ready to get started. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ian.
Thanks, Barry. Good morning or afternoon, everyone. As Barry said, my name's Ian Parkes. I'll take you through the research, and I'm just going to go off video because I've got two screens going and I'll be looking a bit like I'm watching a tennis match otherwise. So just bear with me. Okay, so as Barry said, what I'd like to take you through is some of the highlights and a few excerpts from the survey that we've called Cybersecurity for Mass Markets. Barry alluded to the target audience in his introduction and kindly mentioned that for me. So just from the point of view of the study details, just so that you know what we did. We approached people for an online conversation, recruited them to take part, and they completed a series of questions around cybersecurity and around certain things around their KPIs and various other aspects that we'll go through via an online closed set of questions. We spoke to, or we got responses from 50 all different CSPs, 26 are tier 1 and 24 tier 2, which was our target. We didn't go below the tier 1 or tier 2s, with our respondent profile and cohort being those that were in charge of commercial and marketing operations within those CSPs. And as you can see, this is fairly hot off the press data. It was finished towards the end of May. Geographically, our 50 interviews were split across the globe, but you can see half were undertaken in the Emea region. Again, we tried to get a big spread of the different countries. I appreciate Emea is a very vast region and lots of different CSPs. So we got a good spread across there. North America, 20%, LATAM, and then APAC, just a small proportion of the interviews as well. From an audience perspective, it really fell into roughly, I've categorized them as 3 categories, if you like. We've got the really heads of marketing and senior marketing decision makers, which accounted for around about half of our people. And you can see there on the box that I've squared off, though, VP marketing, head of marketing, etc. There were those that were more focused on value-added services, tended more to be in the tier 2s, but so I almost would classify them as the value-added service experts. And then we've got the product marketing teams as well. So we've had responses from all of those, but basically all of them were responsible for the strategic and tactical activities regarding services that they're offering, either as value-added services, core services, or any other activities that they're doing. So let's take a quick look at what we found. So Just to explain what you'll see in most of the charts, the question specifically, so that you know exactly what we asked, is going to be right at the top. The responses, the main part of the chart, obviously, and then the type of question and who we asked it. And most of them were asked of everyone anyway, but you might have here, for instance, it says multi-code questions, so they could answer any option. Some might be single code and so on. I'm not going to go through that on every chart. You'll be able to see that. So our first question was basically around KPIs and really what are the KPIs on which their performance is measured? And I don't think it will come as any surprise to you on the webinar today that development of new offers and bundles is obviously going to be a key part of any marketing team's activity. Time to market equally, and for product launches or new service launches is equally going to be a KPI. I think the interesting one, and it was more in the senior management marketing team view, was this one around brand positioning and brand management. For me, it came slightly higher than I thought it did. I thought revenue increase and various others might have been a little bit higher than that, but you can see it's a really key thing, and probably where some of the services that they're offering can really slot in and improve the brand positioning and the brand management and the reputation within the market for those particular CSPs. Okay. We then said, well, what are the following of the core values of your brand? And obviously one appreciates that there's going to be multiple, but we gave them a list and they could choose one or none or all of these. And you can see that speed of service and QoE, the top two, so 92% of all of our CSPs were really focused on speed of service. And in such a competitive marketplace, it's not really that much of a surprise. Similarly, QoE, price competitiveness was slightly more of an issue outside of North America. You can see 60% against the 50% in North America. However, the North American market was very much focused on uptime or low latency, and particularly cybersecurity already. You can see that almost half of our markets are seeing cybersecurity as a core brand value. So really elevating it from a value-added service, but that in North America is literally 60% of the CSPs that took part. Now, I will equally say a sample of 50 is quite a small sample. So I've pulled out figures that are quite significantly different regionally, because obviously we are only talking about 10, 20 or 30 in each of the particular regions. So bear that in mind when you see the percentages, but it's really just to indicate some significant differences between the regions as we go through.
Something before you go move on to the next slide. I find these numbers interesting, and we have representatives here for both Emea and from North America. I mean, guys, what's your take on this? Well, North America is 60%. Looking at it, core value. Not that 48% is that much lower, but it is still a big gap. Maybe it is a good time to comment on it right now before we move to the next slide.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, so let me comment here, Barry. So, when we started having conversations with North American carriers about 2 years back, we did not see these numbers. These numbers have been are indeed dramatic. We are seeing many customers actually talking to us, particularly with the 5G standalone. They see differentiation, security as a differentiator for the 5G standalone service. And we are increasingly seeing carriers in North America who have already launched cybersecurity as a value-added service in the last 2 to 3 years with endpoint security products, looking at enhancing that with a network-based security, and also treating cybersecurity as a core service. This is what we are seeing as a trend, and we expect this percentage to actually go up further as soon as we see carriers fully launching the 5G standalone service.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that what's interesting is that over the years, the first value-added services that came out were security. They have definitely hung in there. And I think the main reason it has become a core value for most network operators is because it is basically a service that every single one of their customers needs. All the other value-added services that an operator will launch will have certain market segments, niche market segments that they're trying to gain the euro or the dollar from. But cybersecurity is something that is core to everything they do, and it's good to see it being represented here in this survey.
Excellent. All right, guys, thanks.
Okay.
Ian, back to you.
Thanks, guys. And then, so if we move on to our next one, we were looking at, and actually it leads quite nicely into what Sean was just saying. We asked them about the top value-added service that they're selling across the channels. They're either doing it now or planning to do it. And, you know, I've highlighted a few things here, but maybe take the top two first. So if you look at any form of cybersecurity, we've got the extended, what I've called extended cybersecurity. So that's mobile, home router, and parental control mixed together. So any of the CSPs are offering or planning to offer any one of those. And you can see it's right up into the 90%. So it comes back to what Sean was saying, that really it should be an offering for all of the key players over time, if not already. And then if you break that down and take out the pure parental control people and just look at cybersecurity, it's still only goes down 12 percentage points. 78% are still looking to offer that or offer it already from a mobile and home router point of view. And then you've got the individual ones broken down. But again, you can look at some of the, again, picking out purely mobile cybersecurity, you can see the dominance in the US market, and sorry, North America market, because we did have Canada. 60% of our cohort in North America saying that they're already offering it, planning to offer pure mobile security, compared to overall the 32%. So we've got different activities going on regionally at the moment, but there is very much a focus on that core, getting that cybersecurity really embedded across the network rather than particularly endpoint, let's call it. So we then said, well, you know, is providing cybersecurity to customers aligned to your company strategy for value-added services or network services and necessary services? That's the first part of the slide here. And unusually, but I've done it twice in this particular survey, we got everyone saying, yes, it is. There is no greater comment that I can make apart from every CSP out of the 50 that we spoke to, or that took part in the study, said, yep, absolutely. Cybersecurity is aligned to their customer strategy. We then said, well, you know, in terms of launching a cybersecurity, what applies in terms of where they are on their journey? And we've got various activities going on. So you can see some would consider launching a service, but haven't done so yet. Some have already launched the service with a solution provider. Some have done it on their own. Some would consider launching a service and haven't done so, but might do it internally. There's lots of ways that they can do it, but you can see that there is a true commitment. We then went on and asked a further question, which I haven't listed up here, but it's the red box. We then said, well, if you've already done it, or if you're planning to do it, what's the target uptake of your customer base that you're going to expect to make it financially worthwhile and to create the revenue? And you can see, and it was interesting that even for those that have already taken up the service, compared to the target, the figures were pretty much the same within points of percentages. It's 15%. So I'm going to use the word only 15% of the target customer base. Now, we'll come on to it later probably, but we've done lots and lots of work amongst the consumer base. And I would say that that's a conservative target. And Sean and Murali may have a bit more experience in terms of what's actually happening in the marketplace on that to see whether that is conservative or not.
I'd actually love to hear your thoughts on that, because I know it a lot. We've seen figures that are higher. Well, what are you guys seeing in the field?
No, do you want to take that first?
Yeah. So what we are seeing here, I think many carriers who have already launched the service have seen low adoption rates in the last couple of years. But what we see in other parts of the world where the adoption rates are significantly higher, like Sean would provide some insights into it. The adoption rate gap that exists is what is making most of the product teams interested in actually looking at a new approach, which is to see cybersecurity as a core service.
Yeah, I think there's a total juxtaposed to that number in the kind of interesting in the data. So even up to the CMOs, they say that it should be a core service. But is a core service one that only gets 15% adoption rate? Okay. So I think that there's a little paradox there, and a core service should get much greater rates of adoption. And I think that number is influenced by history. Okay, historically, the operators have been selling just endpoint, and endpoint is something that is very difficult to actually get the customer to actually download and install. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later. So they're influenced by that knowledge. We at Allot, we see it totally differently, and the way we work with our partners is totally different. We see a network to endpoint kind of approach, where if you start offering a service that is available for all of your consumers without having to install something from your network router, you get totally different kind of adoption rates. And when you work in conjunction with those operators to bring them best practices, you start to see that we can give them the adoption rates which actually reflect a core service. So I really find this an interesting slide. So we want a core, but okay, we're happy if 15% make it. It doesn't make any sense. So I think it's really about, as Murali said, we need to change the game a little bit here.
I think also, just to add to that, and just based on work that we've done amongst the actual customer base of a lot of these CSPs, there is a desire and a need and a willingness to adopt cybersecurity and an expectation that it should come from the CSP. So again, just from that perspective as well, and I think that's an even further juxtaposition, to use your term, Sean, that you've actually got a customer base that wants it, so therefore it should be core. And I would argue, and again, we can discuss it later, but it should be higher than 15% based on what the customers have said to us and where they would expect to go to get that particular cybersecurity offering. Yeah,
so if you make it core, that means that you're doing above and below the line marketing. You're doing consistent marketing. You have consistent sales propositions against with all of your sales channel, very well-trained sales channels. You don't do it seasonally. You're doing it on a daily basis, selling a core service every single day, okay? And if you're doing that, you're going to achieve great take-up rates. I've seen in the past, some of the operators I work with, 70% of their customers were paying for a security service. Here today at Allot, we see well above the 30-40% rate. If you work closely with our marketing team that gives you the best practices on how to offer these solutions and where to offer them and how to talk about them to your customers, you receive great, let's say, adoption rates. And it's fueled by the fact that the technology is easy to adopt. So all things that people kind of need to think about when they're talking about cybersecurity as a core value of the company.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to another question, or two questions. In fact, again, this is, I mentioned that I managed to get two 100%. This is the second one. Would you add cybersecurity services to your tariff plan? So very specific to the tariff plan to support their brand positioning. Now, we've already seen how important the brand reputation and brand positioning was, but you can see again that everyone, all of our 50 CSPs said that they would add cyber to the tariff plan. We then said, well, what would be your go-to-market approach? What would be the plan and how would you offer it? And you can see we've got quite a range of views here, but around about 44%, so 2 in 5 would take a paid add-on approach. Others would do a paid bundle, around about a third, and around about a fifth, but over almost half actually in North America said they would put it as a free bundle as part of the tariff plan. Now, that may be a perceptual free bundle, and it may be, but significantly it's going to be bundled into that, not shown as a separate cost. It's going to be part of the overall cost. So the go-to-market strategies are different. We also asked a different question about whether it would be predominantly opt-in or opt-out in terms of the way for the tariff plan. And the vast majority, 75% of them said it would be an opt-out version rather than opt-in. So again, it sort of adds to the element of confusion in some respects. So they're making it core from the point of view of making it an opt-out rather than an opt-in, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be part of the bundle, but we're only targeting 15% of people. So there's an element of perhaps maturity going on here as well.
Well, I would also say that in Emea, the consumer watchdog and consumer regulation don't allow opt out too much anymore. So you'll see that very geographically divided too.
Yeah, very much so.
But I go back to that slide for a second again.
Sure.
These North American numbers are kind of telling. And now, as we have Morelli on the call, I want to pick your brain as the resident expert from North America. So what's going on over here? 50% as opposed to what's that, 22%?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a free bundle, maybe go into a little bit more details about what we're talking about, the free bundle, and why the number's so different.
Yeah, so I think in North America, we are seeing carriers increasingly open to charging for cybersecurity. It wasn't the case, 1 or 2 years back. They used to offer it as a free bundle. Now, the change that we are seeing is that the general perception in the carriers right now is that if the service is simple, zero touch, and if the consumer sees continuous value of the service, they're willing to pay for the service, and therefore the carriers are willing to charge for the service. So this is what we are seeing. I think the trigger points for this is probably the 5G standalone, where they are also thinking about using cybersecurity as a way to differentiate and offer it to their consumers. They want to move their consumers from their 4G networks into 5G. So there are many of these trigger points as well, which is allowing carriers to say, oh, if you want to move from 4G to 5G, we're going to offer cybersecurity free. If you want to stay in 4G, we'll offer you as a chargeable service. So there are many of these different options that carriers are evaluating across North America.
All right, cool.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we then also asked a question around motivations for launching a new cybersecurity service. So again, naturally, we saw some of the KPIs, so it is going to be around increasing revenue, increasing ARPU. However, it is around also providing a greater customer experience. And again, there's a call out there for North America, which is different from the rest of the regions. Similarly, around meeting strategic goals. So it does start to elevate the conversation into a strategic one. Doesn't necessarily fit around NPS. Still in America, North America, it's slightly different. But the other one we asked also was around brand differentiation. And you can see that just as a brand differentiator, 46% are already saying it will create a better competitive position, a brand differentiated position. We asked a supplementary question and then said, well, is it going to be more of a revenue generator or a differentiator, or will it be both? And you can see that the vast majority, 76% of them, said actually it will be both. And we were discussing this morning on the similar webinar that the two things probably go hand in glove. You differentiate to create the revenue. So, and in such a competitive marketplace as the world of the CSP, that differentiation is critical. If it feeds the brand value, if it feeds the brand reputation, it will feed the revenue as well. So I think that the two things really run hand in glove.
Well, some people would think that there's a paradox here because that if you're going to bundle it away for free to the customer, it's not about increasing revenue, which is absolutely incorrect, because if you do bundle it to the customer and you give them value from the security service, they stay with you longer. And so the total lifetime value of your customers will go up with these solutions installed, and i.e. that increases revenue. So whichever business model that you take, you can drive revenue in many, many ways for your operation, okay?
Yeah, I mean, your point's well made, Sean, because again, half of them have said it's reducing churn. So even if they give it free, it's still going to create better revenues because they're not having to go through that finding new customers as well. Okay, and we then said, well, what would drive them to add cybersecurity services to their tariff plan? So again, the ability to increase revenue was top at 88%. The impact on customer experience. So again, think back to the very first chart, and we were saying about the key KPIs and the key brand values and so on. Cyber fits all of those activities and fits all of those needs. So it has an impact on customer experience. It has an impact on brand reputation. You can see 70% said it will impact the brand reputation. The only one which was really quite different and regionally was the impact on NPS, much more significant in North America, where we believe, and we do track a lot more focus still on the NPS and what's happening there compared to in the Emea market. And I think, Sean, you mentioned one or two other reasons for that this morning, if you want to comment, or maybe Murali's got a view as well.
I think the interaction here between the two would be very cool, because
Yeah,
these
it's
differentials,
pretty-
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Who's jumping in?
Well, I'll give you this, Murali. I see this pretty clearly, is that if you think about North America, all the TV ads that are out there with some famous Hollywood star talking about, how great the service is here. They're definitely kind of challenge themselves to prove to each other which one has a better service. And so they're definitely measured on NPS, where in Europe, you see a much more fractionalized type of environment in each of the countries, each of the regions, NPS being important for several operators, KPN for one example in Holland, where they face a lot of stiff competition from the big multinational groups, but you don't see it talked about as much anymore. So thus it doesn't move down into the parts of the KPIs that the whole of the organization is measured against. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, definitely NPS is one of the metric that is very important to the North American carriers, and NPS and churn. Now, there's one very important point that I would want to highlight here is that one of the things that we are seeing is that there's a broader offers transformation for the consumer market that is happening across North American carriers. So with the 5G standalone coming in, they want to repackage their services to make sure that they have a better consumer experience. Also, the other point that many carriers have talked to us about is the imminent threat of truly unlimited data plans, which unthrottled data plans that are going to hit some of the markets with the 5G standalone. So these are the other areas which the carriers are sort of weighing in terms of how they offer their services to their consumers, and cybersecurity is playing a big role in these trends as well.
Thank you. Okay. I'm conscious of the time because I know we've got some other things to do, so I'll go through the last couple of charts. So again, as ever, we talked around what they're doing, how they're planning it. There's always going to be one or two barriers, and as independent observers of a marketplace, we always like to look at some of the challenges. And really, you can see that they focus on two main areas, the two that stand out really, which is the addition of the service in a cost-effective way. So how do they do that? How can they manage the implementation of it cost effectively to make sure that they're going to get their return on investment? That was particularly high in North America, as you can see. And then managing the reputational risk of adding new services. So again, comes back to this brand management, brand reputation, that whole marketplace ethos that they've got, that everyone has got in the CSP community around making sure that whatever they're doing is meeting that reputational issue for them. So they are the two top ones. Again, the cost of the service was particularly an APAC issue. You can see that's a big call out there, as well as understanding the customer needs was far more in LATAM. Again, maybe market dynamics, could be the market maturities there, but there's always going to be one or two barriers, but they're not insurmountable is the thing I would say probably. And then my last question, and then I'll do a quick summary, was a typical research question where we just gave people a series of statements and we just asked whether they agree, strongly agree 5, down to strongly disagree 1 score. And here I've added together those that said a 5 and a 4, gave each one a 5 and a 4. So effectively they agreed with the statement. And really the two top ones again are really quite telling. And I got 100% in North America out of all of our North American cohort. There is a need to focus and offer more cybersecurity services to customers. Pretty much universal agreement with that, 86%. And we will positively consider adding cybersecurity services as a part of a bundled offer and as part of the tariff plan. We've already seen that. I just wanted to get this corroborated once and for all, very clearly in a very simple to agree or disagree to statement. Again, 86% of people agreed with that. take any one of these, and if you read them all now, I won't go through every single one, but any form of service, value-added service, any form of activity around services is being seen to be important, and it's moving up towards the core. And it's really, it's almost like a summary view of what we've seen in all the previous findings from the survey, really. So if I just quickly summarize what I think, and again, this is the independent observers, but cybersecurity service, it is part of the strategic offerings and is being seen as a brand differentiator, will also offer other key benefits like improving the customer experience, growing the revenues, reducing customer churn, greater activity, and so on. We've seen all of that. However, I would say that it's now moving away from being what I would call part of the value-added services suite to a core offering. And I think the more it moves into the core, again, taking some of Sean's points on board, the more you can continuously market it. You can start to drive those additional revenues. You can have that real reputation and brand impact. There's a partner role that can be played. They don't need to do it on their own. Partnership is important as it helps mitigate risk. The marketing, I haven't got into the detail, but this was one of the key findings from other bits, but it was really, as you would expect, very much a push and digital marketing approach, constant reinforcement of the messaging and so on. And finally, I mentioned the barriers. It's all around managing that reputational risk, really. That's going to be consistent, but understand the offer, understand how it will be taken up and who to target. At that point, I will stop sharing, put my video back on and hand over to Barry.
Very good. Excellent stuff. Thank you very much, Ian. We've had a pretty lively discussion already around these slides, and I want to bring some other stuff additional into our conversation. So I am going to share my screen. Give me a second. I want to make sure I get this right. Make sure I share the sound and do it the right way, of course. I have to make sure that I put this on. There we go. There we are. Okay. So I want to use an example of AT&T, okay? Because AT&T is a good example of what we've been talking about offering cybersecurity across the board, at least in the 5G context. So you can see here, this is taken from their material, 5G fast, reliable, secure. We see these buzzwords come up in fact, in a different Coleman Parkes survey of what consumers viewed as the most important information. These were the same top three. We saw it in a Price Waterhouse survey also. What were the top must-haves for consumers in 5G? Fast, reliable, and secure. And if you look at their offering here, in the 5G context, they're offering security across the board in basically what I would call a core offering. So I thought this would be an interesting thing to show and maybe ask you guys out there, what you're seeing with the various different telcos that we're working with. If you're seeing others doing some things that are similar, I'm not sure we're able to mention all the names, but maybe perhaps you can add a little bit here. And this being AT&T, maybe Morale, you want to start what you're seeing in North America. And Sean, I think your input on what you're seeing in Emea would be useful.
So carriers in North America are following a similar path. Other carriers following a similar path as AT&T. We are seeing, particularly for the 5G standalone deployment that they plan in the next couple of months. They want to offer security as one of the main components of their service as a differentiator. In addition to that, one of the things that we are seeing also is carriers looking at convergence between their fixed and the wireless networks, and also offering unified security for both fixed and wireless networks. So these are the two main trends that we see in North America across the carriers.
Interesting. What are you seeing in Emea, Sean?
Yeah, so in Emea, the operators are more or less using it kind of I say with a two-front approach. they see the add-on of security into their higher tariff packages as a way to help operator or their customers move to their higher tariff packages, and they sell it for a price in their lower tariff packages. And it's an interesting concept because that shows the value of everybody of the security, that if they move to the higher tariff plan, they get much better, let's say, perception of what they're getting when they get the more speed, the better number of minutes, whatever they're talking about, how much data they get. But then they get a valuable product also included in that they can see in the tariff plan. So I think that works. That's why I think you see these add-on bundles working a lot more in certain markets, especially like LATAM and Emea for these types of security offerings. So where you have a little bit of price competitiveness and where they want to compete with security for free, I think it's a little bit in the fine print. You get maybe 1 or 3 users of a application that you have to then download. This is specifically for a mobile product. So the teasers that you have there with the actual protection that you get as a consumer, you need to be aware.
Okay. So I want to share now a video clip speaking about AT&T that we have was done recently by Ed Amoroso, with his permission, by the way, to share it here, who is the CEO and founder of Tag Cyber. And he is also the former CISO of AT&T. And he was interviewing his old boss, I guess, the former CEO of AT&T, John Donovan, an important player, reminiscing about when they worked together, but more importantly, speaking about the state of cybersecurity today. And I think they say a few things in this short interview, which I've edited, of course, to only put at the end the relevant things for us in this discussion. I think it's quite interesting. And then I listen to it, and folks, then I'll ask you a couple of questions and relate to it afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to share it, and hopefully it'll work. And here we go.
So I'm here with John Donovan, who is one of America's great business leaders. I think you could argue one of the globe's great business leaders, and an incredible inspiration to me. I've been looking forward to this so much, John. Thanks for joining, and I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
What happened?
I also was looking forward to it. It's been a little while, and we had a lot of good years together. So it's wonderful to see you and see you vibrant and healthy. So
let's go from NSTAC to related topic, your favorite topic and mine, cybersecurity. This has been a hell of a ride, hasn't it, the last 20 years? I remember calling you at midnight and saying, John, I think this is a nation state. And for me, that was kind of new because you didn't have that in the 90s into the early 2000s. Hackers, a bunch of hackers coming after you. What's your observation? You've been at this a long time. I'm just curious, like from a threat perspective, or there's some things keeping you up at night? I mean, you and I have been comparing notes on this a long time. Where's your head on cyber right now?
You look as a historian, and you mentioned calling at midnight saying, I think this is a nation state. You also one time presented to me the concept of saying this went from a beginner's game to really advanced calculus. Then when we saw, DDoS attacks went from, heavy load to fast packet. We spent a whole summer trying to keep networks up. And you think about those are now sort of trite attacks that everybody knows exactly what to do with. And if you're missing them, then so it's really moved into the attack surface is whatever the most advanced thing is. So it's interesting because cybersecurity is no longer a thing. So I used to describe networks as oxygen, that it's invisible when it's working at its best, and it's only evident when it's not there, and then it becomes choking. Cybersecurity becomes the clean air. It's not the oxygen you breathe, but it is the cleanliness of the air that you breathe. And so everybody wants it to be invisible. Nobody likes passwords. Nobody likes complex passwords. And so it's been really interesting. It's a little bit like radar detectors and VASCAR and radar detectors, there's the prevention and there's the detection, and then there's the illicit use. And I just watch it, and everything I read now, it starts to taint everything. Oh, well, that's going to be a problem. The attack surface grows as a result of that. This is going to be something no one's thinking about security on. So it becomes sort of like a cynic's view of the world if you're not careful. And we talked earlier about the landscape of cyber shifting dramatically. And so one of the things that's always been troublesome to me as an executive, and even as a family around the executive, and then as an investor, and that is one of the most vulnerable attack surfaces is people's private lives and their family. And so, I liken it to, we can all read stories about how a Facebook post or a Twitter tweet have cost people reputational risk, because of loose choice of words or letting something come in out of context. Well, we also have promiscuous computing habits at times, around those sorts of platforms. And so what used to evolve from, hey, let me social engineer my way into a system and try to, lift a check for $10,000 out of this company, has now become really advanced. And as you taught me, persistent and threatening. That's why they call it an advanced persistent threat, because these are really smart people who are willing to take a very long period of time with the right target to build an opportunity. And the biggest vulnerability that's not been covered is around the personal lives of executives and their families, where they don't have an IT department supervising them, making them change their passwords and picking a good password and all that. So I felt like, that was something that someone needed to think about. And you can go back on the landscape the last decade. We've tried to do it with, one SIM and two sets of apps and, different protocols and permissions. And then we tried it with two phones. We've all carried two phones for a while, right? And then we put the two together, and then we tried to. So we've been at this problem in various forms for a decade. So it's not new news. But I do think the idea of moving up the stack from the physical phone, the network, the passwords, policies, and permissions, to getting world-class surveillance and the kinds of things that a head of state would get, and bring that down to an affordable level, like that's real. It's magic.
Listen, on behalf of our whole team at Tag Cyber and people watching, and I suspect a lot of our old AT&T colleagues will probably be enjoying our discussion as well. I want to thank you for your time.
Okay, so the thing I want to just what hit me the most, and you guys can comment on it, it was what John Donovan said towards the end. He said that the most vulnerable people out there are those people in their private lives, okay, their families. He said these phones have not been covered up until now, or in short, anyone without an IT organization who can protect them, right? We like to say, I know I've used this, we've used this in a lot of our material, you can't expect the average guy and the average consumer to be his own CISO. Sort of the same kind of a thing, and I know that this is a lot of what we're saying at Allot. So this is an opportunity. I'd like to hear what you guys have, what you're seeing in the field based on that.
Well, I think it's really interesting. Oh, go ahead, Murali.
I don't know. Go ahead, Sean.
Please.
No, I think it's really interesting that you have the CEO of the largest income generating operator in the globe talking about the fact that it doesn't work as an app security, that you need to move into the network. And yes, consumers need to have the type of solutions that protect them, like the heads of state, for an affordable price. And we at Allot, we believe the same thing. We know that less than 5% of the people who actually download an app for security actually get it installed and it's working actively, okay? And we see the same way as he is seeing, is that security needs to come from the network out. and it needs to be something that the consumer doesn't have to install to be protected. It needs to work across all his devices, across all the network. It needs to be converged. And that's what we see the definite need for. And as we'll talk in a little bit, is it when you go to 5G networks, that starts to exponentially change. Riley, what did you want to have to add?
Yeah, I think John made a great point on protecting the families, and I think many carriers are driving their strategy centered around this, and that's one of the points I mentioned previously about convergence. Right, they're talking of protecting the family, which means family members might have their mobile phones, they also have their internet service at home, protecting them together with one unified solution. This is something that many of the carriers are looking at in North America right now. So that was a great point that he made. It's one of the driving forces right now.
Okay, one other thing that I would like to maybe no more than 2 minutes here, because I see we have some questions and we're getting towards the top of the hour. But I can't help but saying this with the Allot hat on me. What John Donovan is talking about the the folks without the IT departments, in other words, the consumers and the small businesses who don't have really can't protect themselves, looking for external support to help them. That's really what we're saying at Allot. So this is just an opportunity maybe for a quick 2-minute high-level overview here of the Allot Secure solution that we're offering to the CSPs to offer to consumers and small businesses. Really at a high level. Obviously, if people are interested, we can take that offline, get more. But I think this is a good opportunity just to take 2 minutes and give a high-level overview of that. What do you guys want to jump in on that?
Go ahead, Ron.
So yeah, let me. So the Allot solution is about protecting the consumer or SMBs across the core of the network, edge of the network, and the endpoint of the network. So fundamentally, that is what would give on-net and off-net protection for the consumer and his family, and that's the solution that the Allot Secure offers. Okay, very good. So let's go. Let's see what time it is. We've got 10 minutes to the top of the hour, and I have about 3 or 4 questions here. So I think that's what we're gonna do now. I don't know if you guys you see the Q&A. We have it's more of a comment coming from one of our participants. I'll just read it, and this is something we could follow up with later. But Verizon has this type of service for North America since at least 2012 for the customers. They did research in what customers expected from the carrier. So, I don't know if Murali, you want to, obviously we could follow up with this gentleman later, but we appreciate your comment, Alex. But if you want to comment on that? Yeah, so I think what we see from the tier 1 carriers in the US is that they all launched security services to consumers a couple of years back, primarily with endpoint security, different platforms like Lookout, McAfee, and these products. What we are seeing now is that many of these carriers are sort of overlaying that service, the endpoint, with network-based security as well, to provide better interaction with the consumer, and also achieving those higher adoption rates and zero-touch sort of security service.
Okay. Before
I just say to Alex, I previously, if you check me out on LinkedIn, worked with Avast. So I was very deeply familiar with the family protection products that Verizon has in the marketplace. And that's interesting. It also correlates with Ian's research, where you see parental control being a little bit more, let's say, top of the mind of the CMOs in North America. So yeah, quite familiar with what was being done there with Verizon and Avast, and it was a very interesting family proposition. And the core of that was that you were marketing that to your install base, or they were, quite well, to be able to get the adoption rates. And you mentioned a network-based solution. I would be guessing it would be a DNS-based solution, as they don't use our inline solutions, and we don't really have a competitor there. They could be using some DNS filtering from their DNS provider as a simple way for regulatory and let's say compliance issues on their network. I have not seen Verizon actually publicly advertise a network-based solution that they sold to their customers. So yeah, I'd like to pick up that conversation with you if you'd like. Okay.
Okay. I'll put you guys in touch afterwards. Couple of additional questions. Okay. North America seems to be a bit more advanced stage in terms of 5G adoption, and viewing cybersecurity as a differentiator to drive 5G adoption. Why do you think this is the case? Is it the case?
So some of the customers that we are dealing with have been talking to us about, how do they move their 4G subscribers to 5G, and wanting to use security as one of the differentiators for that that transition. Most of the carriers are launching, most of the wireless carriers are launching 5G in North America. So it's going to be a level playing field once they all launch 5G standalone. The question now is, packaging cybersecurity. There are different options there. Carriers are looking at. One of the options is getting security as a bundled option once you move to a 5G data plan. These are one of the options. The other options are to package, if you're continuing to stay with 5G, moving up the plan and essentially getting security as a service, as a free service. So there are these multiple options, but definitely 5G is the trigger point, and we are seeing also the issue of unlimited data, truly unlimited data plans that many carriers are anticipating over the next year to be the reason why they want to package security along with the 5G.
Okay. Thank you. I have 2 more questions. I think they're more for you, Ian, but guys, feel free to jump in if it's relevant for you guys too. Do you think that CSPs are being conservative with their target of 15% take up of cybersecurity based on what you've been seeing when researching consumers? I think you actually pointed that out, that you do think it's, but I think that actually, and I'm reminding that I actually wanted to open up that conversation because I think we're seeing different numbers, but maybe you start from your perspective as third party.
Sure. I think I mentioned it actually in the conversation. I do think it's conservative. And again, I'd firstly accept that's easy for me to say as the independent observer. I'm not the one out marketing and selling the product, but everything that we've done with the consumer world, and I've lost count of the number of interviews we've done. It's in the tens of thousands now over the last few years. And there's just been a consistent response around cyber. Everyone gets the threat. Everyone knows they need the protection. It's a bit like house insurance, and it's a bit like all the other things, really. It's becoming semi-utility in the mindset. However, there's confusion about how do they go about it. And to Sean's earlier point, only 5% really get to the point of actively downloading and installing it and making it work properly, because they probably get to the point where they just don't know because they're not a CISO and they're not technically minded. And one of that confusion is stopping the uptake. And I think by the CSP, who they believe should be the key provider of the service direct to them as part of the bundle, by creating that core vision or that core element of the service, takes away all that confusion. It takes away all of that decision making. And that's why I think the rate of increase should be much more, and the uptake should be much more than 15%. Because you're really taking away that level of confusion. You're taking all of that and you're promoting it as a core service that people will buy when they're looking at their next level of activity with the CSP.
Okay. You guys want to add anything to it from our own experience? I mean, I know we're seeing numbers higher than that. Yeah, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. My dog started barking, sorry. So, yeah. The reason that we see higher adoption rates with our solution is plain and simple. And Ian hit it on the head, the nail on the head. is that you don't need to install our solutions, and the customer just needs to click yes to be protected. It's a totally different way of being able to offer a solution and protect customers on a mass level. So I think that with what's going on in network-based solutions, especially on the CPE, the cool things that you can do for IoT and protection around behavioral analysis, it's a really kind of a new wave. We'll be able to virtualize those services and put them in software-defined networks, in 5G networks, really be able to protect people with in their online experience, not produce any latency to be protected. People uninstall their mobile security products because they start to wear on the battery. Network-based solutions don't do this. So there's a lot of reasons why you, as an operator, an advisor to an operator, someone thinking about making a marketing campaign for a value-added service successful, to really deep dive into the technology, and you'll see there's a big difference with the mass explosion of connected devices on the way you need to address security there. And yeah, that's how I see it when I talk with the CMOs that we surveyed.
Excellent. Murali, any last comments before we wrap it up? Just keep it in close to the top of the hour.
Yeah, so I think many carriers are excited about hearing about high adoption rates, but I think when they start the conversation, they talk about their experience, typical experience of VAS services, which is typically 2 to 5% adoption rates. So I think once carriers in North America start deploying this kind of a service, you will see significant uptake, simply because it's a very easy and simple service. And just like in EMEA, Sean has seen some significant, I would say, success with the deployment of the service. We expect the same thing in North America as well.
Excellent. All right, guys, we're almost out of time, so we've reached the end of today's webinar, and I want to take the opportunity to thank Ian Parkes, Director at Coleman Parkes Research, Murali Prasad, Allot's Regional Vice President for Service Providers in North America, and Sean O'Bray, Sales Director for Security at Allot, for joining me today. I also want to thank all of you for taking your time from your busy schedules for participating in the webinar. We don't take it for granted. We know you're busy. I want to remind everyone that the session has been recorded and will be available on demand. And that brings us to the conclusion of today's webinar. We look forward to hosting you again on upcoming webinars. Thank you all for joining. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
I just want to say
goodbye.
Thanks to Mr. Atonga for connecting with me. I appreciate it. Take care.
Cool
Take
stuff.
care.
Good stuff.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.